Ja, jeg har ikke sagt noget endnu. Oh my god. Hej Mia. Velkommen til. Hey. Hej Mia. Ja, vi try again. Jeg er meget bedre i dag. 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 Så. Let's do it. Let's do it. Okay. Jeg ved ikke, om det er ham, jeg fandt i går.
So I guess that's the best you can do then.
Jeg fandt en ret god YouTuber i går. Det var det. Jeg skal bare lige se. Nej, det var ikke ham. Det var ikke ham.
So I guess that's the best.
Han lavede mange gode Pokémon-videoer, så jeg vil lige se det. Det var okay. Jeg må lige finde... His channel. Det værste godt, at den var der. Det var lige der. Med bangers. Og nu er den der ikke engang. What the fuck? Hvor jeg på YouTube giver mening. Jeg kan ikke huske, hvad den hed. Jeg så et par videoer i går. Og det var... Jeg kan ikke engang huske, hvad den hed. Det er det værste ved det. This is Snart. Okay, let's sit den her.
If you take a look at your favorite shows, a large majority of them feature story arcs. Story arcs and how they are constructed from the setup to the climax, and finally, the ending, all play a large factor into a show's quality and likability. Well-done story arcs have the power to turn a show from being good to being your absolute favorite thing.
Jamen lidt mere.
Shonen anime are a prime example of this, with how their shows frame their story into arcs, focus on specific conflicts, whether it be a tournament arc or an arc centered around a specific villain, or just any high-stakes situation. Western animation has had their fair share of shows with season-long arcs, and you have to look no further to find them than in the Ben 10 franchise, of course. With a total of 230 episodes across the 4 prime shows, the series has plenty of opportunity to have designated story arcs for Ben 10 to find himself in. So in this video, I decided, why not go back and rank all the story arcs in Ben 10 up until Omniverse? Now, unlike shonen anime, Ben 10 at times muddies up its arcs due to the episodic nature of the show. So I may talk about some arcs that you probably don't really consider an arc due to just Ben 10's nature, so just keep that fact in mind. It is also worth mentioning that these rankings are all my opinion, so if I dislike your favorite arc, don't take it too personally, but if you do, please leave a comment on my video so we can get in that holy algorithm, you know.
Undskyld, jeg bare lige kommer og afbryder på den her måde, men det er kun fordi, at der er sket det, jeg lige har modtaget en mail, hvad er det, for 2 minutter siden, som jeg lige er blevet bedt om kort at læse op for jer herinde. Men inden jeg gør det, så skal jeg lige fortælle jer noget. For når man står herude bagved, så kan vi simpelthen stå og høre og lægge mærke til den meget, meget umiddelbare og meget, meget lattermilde stemning, som er herinde hos jer. Altså, vi kan simpelthen stå og lægge mærke til alle de meget, meget hjertelige grin, og ikke mindst de meget, meget, meget forskelligartede grin, som er herinde hos jer. Og det er her, at mailen den kommer ind i billedet. For det er faktisk sådan, at jeg har modtaget den her mail fra EU. Og ja, det er en kendt sag, at EU de harmoniserer jo mere og mere på kulturområdet. Der kommer direktiver for snart det ene og så det andet. Og det er der så også nu kommet på grin. For det er simpelthen sådan, at EU de har lavet en liste over de 10 tilladte grin inden for EU-området. Der skal det så ikke være nogen hemmelighed, at vi fra dansk side har håbet på at få 12 grin med på den her liste. Det havde vi. Helt ærligt, det havde. Altså omvendt, det er ikke for, altså 10 er ikke dårligt. Det er slet ikke for at sige, at 10 er dårligt, slet ikke. Også set i lyset af, at kommissæren for sjov og spas er tysker. Men det er altså blevet mig, der lige skulle læse den her mail op for jer med de 10 tilladte grin, som er smuttet igennem nåløjet. Og det første grin på listen, det er intet mindre end et klassisk jysk grin, som bliver kaldt for fiskekutteren. Og det lyder sådan her. Ja, og sådan bliver det ved i timevis. Og det kan sjovt nok, det kan kombineres. Det kan simpelthen kombineres med det næste grin, vi har på listen, som bliver kaldt for tågehornet. Ja, men så har de det også rigtig sjovt derovre. Til det tredje grin på listen, der skal I huske at sige til alle de tilstedeværende damer, at der er 100% EU-godkendelse for netop det her grin, som bliver kaldt for duen. Læg lige mærke til benstillingen en gang her. Ja, det er meget interessant. Det kan faktisk grine meget vedegnet, hvis der skulle være langt til en tissepause. Så kan jeg... Se, det fjerde grin på listen, ja, det er så en klassisk revygrin, som simpelthen kan opsnuse selv de allermindste pointer, som der måtte være. Og det her grin, det bliver kaldt for sporhunden. Og udover sporhunden, så er det simpelthen lykkedes os i år at få hele 3 dyregrin med på listen. Det er vi ret stolte over. Altså, de er samlet under et punkt, men vi har 3 dyregrin med. Og det første af dyregrinene, det er det, der hedder anden. Og det næste, det er det, der hedder grisen. Og det sidste, det er det, der hedder æslet. Det skal lige pointeres, at æslet primært bliver brugt af yngre mænd i pubertet. Hvad var det, der skete herovre nu? Jamen, det lyder fuldstændig som om, der er en kvinde herovre, den her afdeling, der er på vej uden ulovlig grin. Det må da være dig, der sidder dernede. Det er det grin, vi kalder for søløven. Nå, okay, endda med luffer, kan jeg så se. Det er desværre ikke tilladt. Bare lige, at du ved det, desværre. Og til den herre, der sidder derovre, der skal de huske at sige, det grin, det hedder japaneren. Heller ikke er tilladt. Nej, det er derimod det grin, der hedder det halve nys.
Ja.
Ja, og det næste grin på listen, det er det grin, der hedder popcornmaskinen. Og så kommer vi til et grin, som jeg virkelig har glædet mig til at præsentere jer for. Det er faktisk et af Dansk Revys helt store grin. Og vi har brugt dage og nætter på at forhandle os frem til at få netop det her grin med på listen. Det er det grin, der hedder tandlægestolen. Der må skyldes. Og det ja, og der er stadig gang i søløven derovre, kan jeg så. Vi har fået et specialgrin med i år, og det er vi stolte over. Det er det grin, der hedder mavepusteren. Kan kombineres med støvsugeren. Og det 10. og sidste grin på listen, det er til de folk, der godt kan lide at dele deres glæde med andre. Med andre ord, det er meget, meget involverende grin. Det er det grin, der hedder færdselsbetjenten.
nice. Nice. Er det ham?
Ash Ketchum is the 10-year-old from Pallet Town with 25 years of battling experience. And over the years, Ash has accumulated some incredibly powerful Pokemon. And now that he's officially retired from the anime, we finally have the definitive list of every Pokemon he's ever had. So knowing all of this, today I'm going to be making Ash Ketchum's ultimate team. Now, I know there's a...
Ash Ketchum has caught a lot of Pokemon throughout his journey, like more than you'd probably remember. And while Pikachu has been in the spotlight since day one, Ash's full team roster is way more diverse and sometimes weirder than most fans remember, containing everything from the electric rat himself to interdimensional space monsters and everything in between. Over his travels across different regions and animation styles, Ash has caught, trained, released, traded, borrowed, and even been followed home by some of the rarest Pokemon out there. So today, we are going through every single Pokemon Ash has ever owned, and of course, it all starts back in the Kanto region. Up first is the face of the franchise, Pikachu. Ash woke up late on the day that he was meant to start his journey, and as a result, all of Professor Oak's starter Pokemon had been given away by the time he arrived. As such, he was left with a very temperamental and stubborn Pikachu, who refused to listen, refused to get in a Pokeball, and promptly electrocuted Ash. However, after Ash bravely fought to protect Pikachu from a swarm of Spearows, he ultimately earned the Pokemon's trust. Since that rocky start, the two of them have been completely inseparable partners.
Mia, du må ikke stoppe med at skrive på den her stream, ikke? Ellers så stopper jeg bare. Skal jeg spille for mig selv?
Every region, and Pikachu has fought in every major battle and tournament, defeating powerful Pokemon like Lieutenant Surge's Raichu, Megas like Lucario, and even legendary Pokemon like Tapu Koko. And as he's been on this journey every single step of the way, he is one of the rare Pokemon who we have seen use Z moves and Gigantamax. Honestly, I'm almost surprised that they didn't give him a special Mega form as well. That said, it would likely involve him evolving into a Raichu first, and he's pretty starkly against that, so I guess it does make sense we didn't see one. Pikachu leads Ash's team when he is absent. He watches over younger Pokemon like Togepi, and often breaks up fights between his other teammates. However, this more serious side of him never overtakes his silly side. For example, we'll often see him doing imitations of other Pokemon or people like a makeshift Ditto. In line with that, we can also see him improvising his own attacks several times throughout the series. For example, Rocket Punch against Hitmonchan, and combination attacks where he uses his Thunderbolt in tandem with Squirtle's Water Gun and Rapid Spin to make a tornado of water and lightning. It's this kind of versatility and his incredible resilience that has made him such an effective partner wherever Ash finds himself, which is why he has made his way into the party lineup for just about every major conflict in the series. On his way through Viridian Forest, Ash came across a Caterpie, and despite Misty's disgust, he managed to capture it, making this the first Pokemon he ever caught himself. However, it wouldn't stay a Caterpie for very long. Soon after being added to the team, Ash was attacked by Team Rocket, and in the chaos, Caterpie evolved into a Metapod. From there, he would evolve into a Butterfree when a Beedrill attacked them. That said, even in this final stage, Butterfree wasn't exactly a powerhouse battler. However, he was a fantastic Pokemon, especially thanks to his Sleep Powder, which pretty regularly took care of Team Rocket. But of course, that isn't to say he was a total slouch on the battlefield either. In fact, after Ash beat a Gentleman's Raticate with Butterfree, the man was so impressed that he asked to trade for him. Ash actually accepted this trade, though he ended up regretting it almost immediately when he realized just how much he cared about Butterfree. And because of this, they traded back shortly afterwards. But even so, Butterfree wouldn't stay for very long. In one of the most famous and heartbreaking episodes of early Pokemon, Bye Bye Butterfree, Butterfree finds a pink lady Butterfree and falls in love with her. And ultimately, Ash allows his friend to leave with her, despite knowing that he himself will be sad to lose a friend. For many years, Ash would remember back to Butterfree, however, it wouldn't be until Pokemon Journeys that Butterfree and his mate would reunite with Ash. Next up, we have his loyal aerial ace, Pidgeot. Ash originally caught Pidgeot as a Pidgeotto in Viridian Forest, making it yet another
Og
of
hvad
his
sker der
earliest
mere?
team members. It was during a battle in which Pidgeotto
Bare
was
lide
trying to
generelt.
protect a flock of wild Pidgeys and Pidgeotto from a Fearow that it was pushed into a corner and ultimately forced to evolve mid-battle. This power boost allowed him to defeat the Fearow. Interestingly, Pidgeotto was the only member of Ash's original team of 6, which he was never on bad terms with. And while it had far less episodes dedicated to him than the others, it was a consistent and extremely useful member of the team. For example, Pidgeotto was often used to blow away smoke screens, search with a literal bird's eye view from the sky, or pop Team Rocket's balloon whenever they attacked. However, like Butterfree, Pidgeot was also let go by Ash. After defeating the Fearow, Ash decided to release Pidgeot so that he could continue to protect the other wild bird Pokemon to ensure that Fearow would never attack again. That said, Ash promised to return once he finished his journeys in the Orange Islands, which he didn't do. Oops. But over 2 decades later in Pokemon Journeys, Pidgeot returned and saved Pikachu from Team Rocket. Now that the rest of his flock had matured and become strong enough that they no longer needed his help, he finally rejoined Ash as part of his team. Ash's third capture was Bulbasaur. Bulbasaur was found in the Hidden Village, acting as the guardian to abandoned Pokemon. This role of village protector led Bulbasaur to being hostile towards all trainers, as he blamed them for all of his friends being endangered. This was only reinforced when Team Rocket arrived and tried to steal all of the other Pokemon. Bulbasaur did manage to save an Oddish, and Ash actually ran in to help them as well, ultimately showing Bulbasaur that not all humans are bad. After fending off Team Rocket, Bulbasaur agrees to join Ash if he can defeat him in battle, which he obviously does. In line with this role as a guardian, Bulbasaur was easily one of Ash's most mature Pokemon, and if neither Ash nor Pikachu was present, he served as a pseudo-leader that kinda kept things in order. Of course, this maturity could definitely be thrown out the window whenever Squirtle was involved, as the two of them often butt heads with each other. Like Pikachu, Bulbasaur never evolved and instead stayed in his form throughout the entirety of his journey with Ash. Despite this, Bulbasaur made it all the way to the Indigo Plateau, where he was a core part of Ash's battle against Jeanette Fisher, and even followed him into Johto. However, he would eventually be sent back to Professor Oak's lab to help keep the other Pokemon in check, once again embracing that role as a guardian and a leader. He did return for the Silver Conference, where he battled against Jackson's Shiny Magneton, a battle which showed off just how much he had grown. In the previous fight against Jeanette's Scyther, the Scyther used Double Team to completely overwhelm and nearly defeat Bulbasaur, but when Magneton tried to do the same thing, Bulbasaur immediately had an answer, spinning his vines to cut through all the after images. Bulbasaur then went on to fight to a draw against Jackson's Meganium. From here, Bulbasaur returned to Oak's lab, however, he is definitely one of the Pokemon we see make the most appearances after being sent there, and typically shows up at least once per season. Arguably the second most iconic Pokemon Ash has ever had, though, has got to be his Charizard. Ash originally caught Charizard as a Charmander, who had been abandoned and left in the rain by a cruel trainer named Damien. Ash saved him from the rain, and the Fire-type soon bonded with his team. However, after evolving into a Charmeleon, and later into a Charizard, things became more complicated. With his new strength came a massive ego, and Charizard famously just about completely stopped obeying Ash, sleeping through battles and even ignoring commands unless he deemed the opponent to be worthy. That said, when he did get into a battle, he was an absolute monster. But with this power came a lack of responsibility once they traveled to Johto. Ash often used Charizard against new trainers, which Misty scolded him for as it was effectively bullying. But while Misty had a problem with this, Charizard sure didn't. He continued to become more and more overconfident until the gang came across Liza. She insulted Charizard, and as a result, he wanted to show her just how great he truly was when they reached the Charcific Valley. However, as it turns out, he was just about the smallest and weakest Charizard in the valley. Seeing how much becoming stronger meant to Charizard, Ash put on a show about how he didn't want a weak Pokemon on his team, and how Charizard should just stay there to train, before he ran off with tears in his eyes. That said, this training definitely does pay off, and Charizard would somewhat regularly make appearances to help Ash in major battles going forward. For example, taking on Gary at the Silver Conference, and Nolan's Articuno in the Battle Factory. Eventually, towards the end of the Black and White saga, Charizard goes on to live at Professor Oak's lab with the rest of Ash's Pokemon. After Charizard is the correct Kanto starter, Squirtle. Ash first met his Squirtle as the leader of the Squirtle Squad. a group of abandoned Squirtles causing mischief in their town. These Pokemon were impressed and won over by Team Rocket's Meowth, who told them that Jesse and James were his pets. And in doing so, he convinced them to help Team Rocket steal Pikachu from Ash. However, Team Rocket eventually turned on the Squirtles and started launching bombs at them, even knocking the Squirtle Squad leader onto his back, which led Ash to dive between the stuck Pokemon and an explosion, ultimately earning Squirtle's trust in the process. These bombs went on to cause a forest fire, and the Squirtle Squad rushed to save their town. This eventually led to them finding their home as firefighters working under Officer Jenny. However, their leader opted to stay with Ash instead. Squirtle had a very similar history to Bulbasaur, becoming one of Ash's most reliable allies despite choosing to never evolve, as well as kind of just being a silly little guy. He made his first gym appearance against Blaine's Ninetales and went on to take part in battles against Mandy in the Indigo Plateau. However, he wouldn't stay long after that. In Johto, the gang reunited with the Squirtle Squad for the Fire and Rescue Grand Prix, after which Squirtle went on to return to his old team. However, he does, of course, make appearances afterwards. He returns for the Silver Conference and to help Ash battle Brandon in the Battle Pyramid. Unfortunately, Team Rocket once again gets involved in Pokemon journeys. They become the managers of the Squirtle Squad and work to keep Ash away from Squirtle without the Pokemon's knowledge. Because of this, Squirtle begins feeling abandoned by Ash and gets into a fight with Bulbasaur and Charizard. This is put aside when a fire breaks out and the three of them begin working together to help. After this event, Squirtle learns the truth, hugs Ash, and returns to be with Officer Jenny and the rest of his squad. But Squirtle wasn't the only water type in Ash's early team. He also caught a Krabby. To this point, about half of Ash's captures had been made by friendship rather than skill as a trainer. And Misty was saying that this was all basically a fluke. So Ash went to the beach, found a tiny Krabby, and fought it with a stick until he caught it in a Pokeball. I'm not sure if this actually proves Misty wrong, but I guess he did technically catch the Pokemon. That said, as Ash's 7th Pokemon, Krabby was then transferred to Professor Oak's lab immediately, where it was revealed that he was about half the size of Gary's Krabby. But you know what they say, size totally matters. Krabby wouldn't be used until the first round of the Pokemon League against Mandy's Exeggutor, a battle which was so difficult that it forced Krabby to evolve into Kingler, allowing him to defeat Exeggutor as well as Mandy's Seadra and Golbat. After the Indigo Plateau, Kingler makes another appearance in the World Cup when Ash realizes that the only water type he has is Totodile, and so Kingler is called back to battle for him. He was also going to fight in the Silver Conference, but he was injured by Voltorbs before the match, leading to Squirtle filling in instead. And that's kind of the last time that Kingler was ever relevant, unfortunately. Ash's next Pokemon was a fighting type in Primeape. After learning that Gary had caught 30 Pokemon already while Ash was at 7, he sets out to catch more Pokemon for himself in trying to catch up. He soon finds a Mankey who takes some of Brock's food and tries to catch it, but instead catches a rice ball. This angers Mankey to the point that he steals Ash's hat, and the little monkey soon comes across Team Rocket, where he is promptly kicked by James. This, once again, angers Mankey, this time to the point where he evolves into a very upset Primeape. Luckily, Charmeleon manages to defeat it, and Ash adds Primeape to his team. That said, this was a Pokemon that Ash had to be very cautious about using. For example, he didn't end up bringing it to a battle against Erica, as he thought that this Pokemon's anger would cause him to lose the fight. However, Primeape was perfect for the P1 Grand Prix, a fighting-type tournament. Primeape actually listens to Ash here, eventually, and wins the whole thing. After which, they're approached by Anthony, who offers to train Primeape to become a true champion. And so, Ash agrees to leave Primeape behind, and he has never been back since. The next Pokemon Ash catches is Muck. When arriving in Gringy City, there is a massive electrical outage as the power plant is being overrun by Grimers. These Pokemon were eventually taken care of by a swarm of Magnemites and Magnetons, leaving only their leader Muck standing. With Pikachu's help, Ash manages to defeat and capture this Pokemon. However, Muck was immediately sent to the professor's lab as he smelled too bad to keep on hand. Basically, Ash said, "Oh, this is yucky, I'll make it someone else's problem." But over time, this smell seems to just disappear as it never bothers anyone again, which is probably for the best, as this is easily one of the most affectionate Pokemon that Ash has ever caught, and he tends to smother people in sludgy hugs every chance he gets. Muck made his debut in battle in the Indigo Plateau against Jeanette Fisher, where he manages to take out a Bellsprout that defeated both Pikachu and Bulbasaur. He then returns to battle Gary in the Silver Conference, where he fails to beat both Blastoise and Scizor. And aside from those rare moments, Muck is pretty much relegated to living in Oak's lab, where he jumps on the professor almost every time we see him. From here, Ash goes on to catch just entirely too many Tauros. In a banned episode, Ash visits the Safari Zone, where he tries to catch as many Pokemon as possible. However, every time he throws a Safari Ball, a Tauros runs in front of it, and ultimately he ends up with 30 Tauros as a result. All of these were sent to Professor Oak's lab, and none of them would be used until the Orange League, where Ash selected one of them to replace his sleeping Snorlax. He was first sent in against Drake's Gengar, but after being hit by a Confuse Ray, he had to be swapped out, though he was later sent back in, where he managed to defeat Drake's Venusaur. Tauros then made an appearance in Johto when he took part in the Tauros Battling Tournament, and even managed to take the win. This wound up getting Ash a ton of trade offers for the Pokemon, but he refused all of them and wound up sending Tauros back to Oak's lab until he battles Gary at the Silver Conference, where Tauros is defeated by Nidoqueen. Tauros also returns to battle Annabelle's Metagross in Hoenn. However, outside of this appearance, he's pretty much only seen in Oak's lab with the rest of his herd. Yet another water type in Ash's roster is Lapras, the first Pokemon he caught in the Orange Islands. Lapras was found injured and separated from its pod, and initially they were terrified of humans. However, they grew close to Ash after he rescued them from Team Rocket. Lapras soon became both a trusted battler and a convenient mode of transportation across the Orange Islands. Rather than making their debut in battle, Lapras was instead first used in a wave ride race against Sissy and her Blastoise in the Mekon Gym. They were also called in for the Naval Gym and the battle against Drake, though neither of those was particularly successful. After the Orange League, Ash found Lapras' pod. However, all of them hated humans because of Captain Crook, and as such, they refused to allow Lapras to rejoin them now that they had partnered with Ash. But once Captain Crook and his Tentacruel were defeated, Lapras earned the herd's trust once again, and they left Ash's party to be with their family. Lapras and their pod make a return appearance, and after defeating Team Rocket, Lapras is made the leader of their pack. And finally, Lapras would make one more appearance in Pokemon Journey, where they ask Ash for help rescuing a trapped Wailord. After which, they say their goodbyes, and once again, Lapras goes to rejoin their family. The final Pokemon Ash catches in the Orange Islands is Snorlax, a wild Pokemon which was devouring everything that it could get its hands on. However, it was eventually revealed that Snorlax was a very good swimmer, and the locals became worried that he would go on to reach the next island and continue to eat until there was nothing left. This Pokemon completely dominated anyone who tried to stop it until Jigglypuff was lured out and put Snorlax to sleep with Sing. This opened up an opportunity for Ash to catch it while it was passed out. We first see Snorlax being used in battle against a supersized Rhydon, where Snorlax manages to send the Pokemon flying with a Mega Punch, showing just how powerful this dude really is. Going into Johto, Snorlax took part in Rikishiki Town's sumo conference, where he won a year's worth of food, which he promptly ate in one sitting. He then went on to take down Claire's Kingdra in Ash's rematch, as well as Gary's Nidoqueen at the Silver Conference. And in the following round, Snorlax managed to take out Harrison's Hypno and Steelix as well. Then in Hoenn, Snorlax took part in a battle against Greta, and in Sinnoh he returned to help Ash win the second round in the Lily of the Valley Conference. While it might be a bit of a hassle to keep Snorlax well fed, he has consistently been one of Ash's most powerful and reliable Pokemon, essentially rocking a 100% win rate in battle, which is fantastic because we love Snorlax in this house. He is easily one of the most useful Pokemon Ash has ever had, at least when he's awake. From here, Ash and the gang go to the Johto region, where Ash adds another 6 new Pokemon to his team. And just like in Kanto, his first capture is another bug type, Heracross. Heracross became interested in Ash after he helped settle a territorial dispute between Wild Heracross and Pinsir that was caused by Team Rocket. This Pokemon began following Ash until he was eventually noticed, and was soon recruited into Ash's new party. Heracross was a little bit goofy and became obsessed with drinking sap, which was unfortunate for Bulbasaur, who had a whole bulb of it on his back. However, when it came time to get serious, Heracross was a pretty powerful tank that was able to flip and toss many of the massive machines that Team Rocket used in their attacks. We first saw him in battle against Rochelle's Donphans, and while he defeated the first one, the second one did take him out. That said, he also managed to win against Shingo's Scizor, but even so, he was sent to Oak's lab shortly afterwards. We did, however, see him come back to the team in the Silver Conference in Ash's battle against Gary, where he managed to defeat a Magmar despite a type disadvantage. but he was then defeated by Blastoise's Hydro Pump. Heracross returned for a battle against Spencer's Venusaur and Hoenn, and for Sinnoh's Lily of the Valley Conference, where he kept getting put to sleep. First against Nando, where he was paired against a Kricketune who used Sing, and later against Tobias's Darkrai, where he was overwhelmed by Dark Void and Dream Eater. After this, Heracross was retired to Oak's Lab, where he remains to this day. Following Heracross, we get into Ash's tradition of picking up regional starters, the first of which is his Bayleaf. Ash met this Pokemon as a very stubborn Chikorita and promptly went on to absolutely dunk on her with his Charizard, to the point where he actually injured the wild Pokemon. Despite this rough start, Ash went on to rescue Chikorita from Team Rocket and won her over in the process. Continuing on this trend of battling despite type disadvantages, Ash then brought Chikorita to his battle against Falkner, where she was defeated by his Hoothoot. This was largely a result of Chikorita insisting that she battle to prove herself regardless of the odds or logic. And this became a bit of a problem as we later see her even refusing to be recalled in the battle against Eradicate. This is because Chikorita was jealous of Pikachu, so when Ash wanted to swap her out for him, she dug her heels in and held her ground. She then goes on to run away, joins a group of Pokemon by defeating their primate leader, and...
1. august, det er ikke spørg så meget, ikke spørg så meget om det der. Ikke spørg så meget, det føler jeg tænker, at jeg skal stresse over det nu.
Once again is targeted by Team Rocket until Ash saves her, finally earning her trust once and for all. So naturally, after this, she was brought to Bugsy's gym for another bad type matchup. Eventually, Team Rocket goes on to put Ash in danger, and Chikorita is forced to evolve into Bayleaf to protect him. However, despite more than doubling in size, Bayleaf didn't realize that she had grown and still acted as though she was tiny. Because of this, she would keep trying to leap into Ash's arms, hurting him, and eventually making him mad enough that he gets angry and tells her to get away from him. This leads to her running away again, and again, this was overcome when she and Ash worked together to defeat Team Rocket. That said, her clingy behavior continued, and after she was swapped out for Kingler in the World Cup, she became restless from being separated from Ash while she was at Oak's lab. Bayleaf also took part in the Extreme Pokemon race with Ash against Gary and his Arcanine, where they narrowly took a win. This led to an inevitable rematch of sorts in the Silver Conference, where she battled against and lost to Gary's Blastoise. Luckily, she did redeem herself in her final battle of the series against Harrison's Houndoom, only to be beaten by his Blaziken right afterwards. I swear, this Pokemon almost only battled against Pokemon it was weak against. It's crazy. But after this, Ash goes on to Hoenn, and Bayleaf is left behind in Oak's lab. Up next, we have Ash's Quilava. Ash had learned from a trainer named Koji that there was Cyndaquil in the forest leading up to Azalea Town, and as he looked for one, he was attacked by Team Rocket and forced to hide in a cave where he finds a Cyndaquil. When Team Rocket returns, Cyndaquil uses Flamethrower to destroy their mech, but this causes an explosion and Ash catches the Pokemon to protect it from the blast. Koji then arrives and challenges Ash to a battle for ownership of Cyndaquil, and despite Koji using a Sandslash and having a type advantage, Cyndaquil still wins the fight. However, Koji is a sore loser and steals Cyndaquil in a net, only for the Pokemon to burn him and return to Ash. From here, Cyndaquil became a mainstay in most of Johto's gym battles. He takes on Bugsy's Scyther, two of Whitney's Pokemon, Morty's Ghastly, Jasmine's Steelix, and Price's Dugong. However, he also had a few rough losses, including Price's Piloswine, a Venusaur, a Magby, and Jackson's Magneton, all of which leads Ash to consider evolving Cyndaquil, though this doesn't end up happening yet, and instead he is sent to Oak's lab. Later, in the Lily of the Valley conference, Cyndaquil was once again attacked by Team Rocket and managed to evolve into a Quilava in a battle against their mech. This new form allowed him to take on Nando's Armaldo, though he also gets knocked out in doing so. But after this, it was back to Oak's lab for Quilava. Finishing up the Johto starter trio is of course Totodile, one of the most fantastic Pokemon Ash has ever owned. Like with Cyndaquil, this Totodile was a contested capture, though this time it was Misty that Ash was competing against. Each of them threw a lure ball at him, but it was Ash that ended up catching Totodile. Even so, it was decided that Ash and Misty would battle to see who could keep it. And again, Ash wins, so Totodile is added to the team. This little guy quickly showed off his huge personality. He was extremely silly at every opportunity, whether he was making a heart out of water to impress an Azumarill, or trying to run on top of a Miltank's rollout. Speaking of which, this fight against Whitney's Miltank is actually the only gym battle that Totodile was used in all of Johto. And of course, he was one-shot, so this wasn't exactly a great showing. They did have a rematch, which went better, but he still lost here as well. That said, we do see a better showing in several event matchups. For example, in the World Cup, where he and Kingler were Ash's only potential entries. Here, Totodile defeats a Kingdra, though he does lose to Misty's Poliwhirl shortly afterwards. Then in the Battle Park, he takes out a Charizard, and in an unofficial gym, he lost to a Lantern. As for the Silver Conference, he was defeated by and then redeemed himself against Harrison's Sneasel. He got smashed by Macy's Electabuzz, and ultimately he was taken out by a Hypno. With a very rough battle history, Totodile was ultimately sent back to Oak's lab when Ash left the region. On to Ash's first shiny Pokemon, Noctowl. This was a rare Pokemon that Dr. Wiseman was trying to capture, however they were using traps and tricks rather than traditional Pokeballs, something which upset Ash to the point where he tried to capture the Pokemon himself the right way. This was interrupted when Team Rocket attacked, and Ash had to desperately try to save the Noctowl from one of their mechs, only to get himself caught in the process. The freed bird then returned to Ash's team, and then led the rest of his Pokemon to come and save him. After Team Rocket was defeated, Noctowl challenged Ash to a battle, and once the battle was over, Ash managed to capture it. This Pokemon was able to use Hypnosis to fool opponents. For example, he tricked a Firo into thinking that he was a
Det er sjovt, det er
Charizard
en
and
ule,
made
ikke?
it run away
Og
out of
ulen
fear.
er
Noctowl was
symboler
at
på
the center
visdom,
of
ikke?
Ash's plan to
Og
take
så er den
on
shiny,
Dorothy,
så en sjælden
and
visdom
even
Pokémon.
Foresight to allow his Pokemon to take on the Ghost types. Noctowl was also used in the first battle against Claire, though it really didn't go well, to the point that he wasn't even brought to the rematch. Similarly, in the Silver Conference, Harrison's Steelix took down Noctowl in a single hit, after which he would be sent back to Oak's lab, being only brought out of retirement during the Lily of the Valley Conference, where Noctowl was used against Conway's Shuckle and Dusknoir, again not doing so well, though it did take out a Licky Licky at the very least. Ash's final Johto edition was his Donphan, a Pokemon which he had hatched from an egg. As a Phanpy, they were very playful and energetic, and like Pikachu, they refused to go back into their ball. However, this made them vulnerable to Team Rocket, who tried to steal it. Luckily, Pikachu did save it, but their electricity scared Phanpy so much that they ran back to Team Rocket, who ultimately used this Pokemon as bait to try and capture Pikachu in the future. They of course went on to betray Phanpy, and by using Rollout, it managed to save both itself and Pikachu before returning to Ash. Luckily, by the time the Silver Conference rolled around, Phanpy was strong enough to be a central part of Ash's plan to take on Macy, forcing her to swap out her Electabuzz and even defeating her Slugma before itself being taken out by a Quilava. Phanpy would then return to Ash and Hoenn after growing from their time in Oak's lab. In a battle against Team Rocket, they even managed to evolve into a Donphan, leading them to being used in the Battle Pike challenge against Lucy, where it takes on her Seviper. Later, Donphan even returned in Sinnoh for the Lily of the Valley Conference, though they were taken out by Conway's Dusknoir. Following Johto, Ash went on to challenge the Hoenn League and the Battle Frontier, and just as he did in both Kanto and Johto, Ash catches the regional bird. That's right, the first catch in Hoenn is Swellow. Ash first met them as a Tailo, who was the leader of a flock in Petalburg Woods that sent his underlings to attack Pikachu. Despite taking several Thunderbolts, Swellow refused to back down. So to prevent it from getting even more injured, Ash ends up catching it. It wouldn't take long before Talo's first matches, a battle against a Zigzagoon and a Pelipper, both of which showed off just how strong and resilient this Talo was. However, the Pelipper had a Magby hidden in its mouth, and a surprise flamethrower leads to Talo's loss. Similarly, but in a much less silly way, Talo was also sent in against Brawly's Machop and gets taken out despite the type advantage. On the other hand, in the Crossgate Pokeringer competition, Talo became so determined to win that they actually evolved into a Swellow, and it immediately turns things around, proving its strength by defeating Winona's shiny Swellow, teaming up with Pikachu to take on Tate and Liza's Solrock and Lunatone, and even beating Juan's Whiscash. Swellow remained a major part of Ash's strategy going into the Evergrande Conference and the Victory Tournament, taking on Katie's Venomoth and Scizor, drawing against Morrison's Gligar, and defeating Tyson's Hariyama and Donphan, definitely turning things around since the time they were a Talo. Swellow also followed Ash to the Kanto Battle Frontier, where they were used against Tucker and Spencer, though when Ash left for Sinnoh, Swellow was sent to Oak's lab. That is until the Lily of the Valley Conference, where they were brought back to battle Tobias, matching up against a Latios in a very unfortunate way. But Tobias is an obvious hacker, so we can just pretend that Swellow went out on a high note instead. Hoenn was the first time that Ash doesn't get all three starter Pokemon, and instead only added Sceptile to his team. Sceptile was first encountered as a Trico when Ash helped it save its home, after which he battled Pikachu and was captured. That said, Trico was a bit of a prideful loner and didn't initially fit in with Ash's other Pokemon. That is, until he saved Maze Torchic from a Wild's Viper. Trico was pretty badly injured in this fight, and so he left to train on his own, perfecting a new way to use Pound. Once he returned, he was strong enough to take Viper out and to protect his friends. That said, his move pool was still pretty limited, and he didn't know any grass-type moves. So when Ash sent Trico in against Roxanne, which should have been a positive type matchup, it resulted in him losing the battle as Trico only knew normal-type moves. However, he was much more prepared when it came time to battle Brawly, taking down his Machop in the first match and Hariyama in the rematch. Flannery's gym battle would be much more difficult for him, obviously, but this Pokemon definitely turned over a new leaf when taking on a rampaging Loudred. During this encounter, Trico manages to evolve into a Grovyle and learns Leaf Blade, making him a much more effective Pokemon in battle. So much so that he even took down Norman's Slacking and nearly beat Winona's Altaria and Juan's Love Disc as well. Grovyle goes on to help with the Victory Tournament in several matches, but their next big step forward was in the Battle Frontier, where they evolve into Sceptile to rescue a Meganium that it had a crush on. Ultimately, Sceptile was left behind when Ash moved on to Sinnoh. However, he did make an appearance to take on and defeat Tobias's Darkrai, though they lost to the Latios, which followed. Next up, we have Corphish, a Pokemon who ambushed the group from under the sand. After Trico battled it, Ash caught them, and they immediately started causing trouble. Corphish had a hard time making friends as they often smacked other Pokemon as a weird greeting and stole their food. And he even got sick after eating rope and seaweed, but bounced back in time to stop Team Rocket. His gym debut was against Brawly, where he managed to beat a Machop, but loses to Hariyama. Later, he was picked to take on Flannery, defeating both Magcargo and Torkoal. Similarly, in the battle against Juan, Corphish managed to win against both his Celio and his Love Disc. However, despite being useful in his own right, Corphish often clashed with challenging other opponents out of spite. For example, he lost to a Ludicolo who danced circles around him. But this was made up for by rescuing Ludicolo and single-handedly beating Team Rocket afterwards. Once Corphish was more confident in himself, he was brought to both the Evergrande Conference and the Victory Tournament, where we see him defeating Dominic's Swalot, as well as Katie's Golduck, Morrison's Girafarig and Growlithe, even going on to battle their Swampert to a draw, though Tyson's Hariyama does prove to be too much for the little crab. On that note, while Corphish was an absolute powerhouse throughout almost all of Hoenn, the Battle Frontier was a much rougher time for him, and he took almost exclusively losses. Despite his rough ending, Corphish was one of Ash's most consistent and reliable Pokemon who consistently took out several powerful opponents. Even so, we never really see him returning to battle after being sent to Oak's lab when Ash leaves for Sinnoh. Completing his Grass, Water, and Fire core is Torkoal. Ash came across Torkoal in the Valley of Steel, where it was being ganged up on by a pack of Steel types. Their leader, Steelix, eventually challenged Torkoal directly, and the tortoise was getting completely overwhelmed. However, using what he learned from Flannery, Ash told the wild Torkoal to use Overheat, which allowed them to defeat Steelix. This made Torkoal deeply respect Ash, and when asked to join the team, he accepted. From there, Torkoal became one of the more emotional members of Ash's team, frequently bursting into smoke and tears whenever they were excited, happy, or just confused. While they didn't exactly shine at carnival games or impromptu soccer matches, they did hold their own in battle, beating Norman Slackoff, winning a practice match against a Scizor, and helping a Spoink find its Pearl. Twice. That said, they also lost to Watson's Manectric and Norman's Vigoroth, who beat them in one hit, though this was after he defeated the Slackoff, so Torkoal was already pretty worn down. Torkoal was of course also a part of Ash's lineup for the Evergrande Conference, where they tied against Dominic's Tropius in a match, and later took down Tyson's Shiftry with a well-timed flamethrower. They also battled against Katie's Golduck and Morrison's Steelix, though both ended in losses. And their final match came against Tyson's Hariyama, who brushed off a flamethrower like it was nothing before knocking Torkoal out. As Ash went on to challenge the Battle Frontier, Torkoal was sent back to Oak's lab, where he made friends with Cyndaquil and eventually learned Heat Wave. Despite this, when he finally went back to battle Brendan's Registeel, he was ultimately defeated once again, and his final battle against Tobias's Darkrai doesn't go much better, as Torkoal was defeated by a Dark Pulse. Overall, Torkoal has a pretty rocky record, being one of Ash's few Pokemon who lost more than half of their battles. However, if you take out the battles against legendary Pokemon, it actually doesn't do too bad. And last but not least for Hoenn is Ash's prank-loving Glalie. We met Glalie as a mischievous snow runt on Isabey Island, where he stole Ash's badges and leads him on a wild chase across the area. The snow runt even leaves badges behind like breadcrumbs to keep the game going. Ash eventually follows them into the snow and
Men jeg slutter nu. For nu. Jeg tror, vi tager lidt stille og roligt. Små streams. Jeg tror, det er godt for mig. At det bare starte lidt, ikke? Men jeg kan ikke lave store streams. Det tager også energi at streame. Det er jo ikke bare noget, man kan gøre. Det er ikke bare noget, man kan. Det er ikke bare noget. Det tager jo lidt energi. Så jeg tror bare ikke, jeg har energi nok til at til at streame længere gange, ikke? Så I'm gonna say, jeg smutter for nu. Jeg skal passe på mig selv her. Men hey alle sammen. Are you good? Vi ses. Jeg kommer tilbage i dag. Det gør jeg. Men så lad mig passe på mig selv. Beklager Mia.